And we're streaming live.
I'm just checking in to make sure that you know I'm here, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me, Mayor Martin?
My loud voice. Sorry, Cynthia.
Just checking in to make sure you knew I was here.
Yes, thank you. Okay. I think, you know what, let's just leave it. We'll leave. Yeah, I don't think it's a too bad an echo. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It is 6:30. Are we ready, Marcy? Ready? Yeah. Gabriella, you're good to go?
Yep, good to go.
Excellent. Okay. So I'd like to call to order the meeting of March 14th. This is our regular meeting of council at 6:30 p.m. And I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Lekwungen speaking people. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Council, I'd like to make one change, please. I'd like to move 7.2 to 7.1, and then 7.1 will just reverse to 7.2. And that would be the only change that I would just like to make. So with that, because I did make a change, may I get a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those, Marcy, with me being back now, with us being back at the table, can I still just go those in opposition, or should I be looking for the affirmative vote as well? Okay. Yes, and to be honest, I'm going to come full circle because I should do that check for Mike and acknowledge that. So I'll do the agenda and then I will come to acknowledge who's online. So those in opposition, nobody opposes. Thank you. So this evening we have two councillors who are not at the table. Councillor Jansen is away for personal reasons, and Councillor Day is online this evening. Councillor Day, could you just acknowledge you're there for us, please?
Yes, I am here.
Great, thank you. So that takes us to Mayor's message. Two things I just wanted to share. Number one, I just wanted to say, isn't this exciting that we're back? I had a plan on having little bottles of Perrier, and I was going to make everybody shake them up and pop them like champagne that we're in person, but decided not to do that. Didn't want to make staff clean up after. So the other thing I wanted to share with everyone, and this is more for the public because I know council has already seen this letter, but I just wanted to share it with the public just because I think it speaks so well about our staff. So if you'll just give me 30 seconds. This says, greetings. At Yellow Sheet Construction Data, we track and report on all construction activity on Vancouver Island, Haida Gwaii, and Powell River, covering projects from contemplation to completion. One of the most critically important sources of information is the annual capital plan budget documents made available by municipalities. We disseminate information about these potential capital projects to those in the construction sector who will use this early alert to marshal themselves in anticipation of formal calls for design, construction, and project management. One of my senior researchers has informed me that by far and away, the City of Colwood has the best capital plan budget documents of over 50 municipal authorities we track. We know that there is a great deal of work involved in preparing these documents, and the work of your staff is truly noteworthy and much appreciated. I would also like to mention that Colwood staff always provide us with prompt responses to our occasional queries. And on behalf of all of us here at Yellow Sheet Construction Data, our thanks are endless for their very much appreciated responsiveness. Again, Colwood stands head and shoulders above. So congratulations, staff, and thank you for that work. There's three staff members, so I guess we can clap for those three staff members. And please share with your team. our appreciation. Moving on to 4, adoption receipt of minutes. Looking for a motion for the regular council meeting minutes of February 28th. Moved by Councillor Parkinson, seconded by Councillor Kobayashi. Are there any errors, omissions, questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Moving on to public participation. I have a quick thing that I need to read about public participation, so please bear with me. I'm sorry. Oh, I thought I heard somebody say something. Sorry. One written submission was received regarding development variance permit 1764 Island Highway, and 5 written submissions were received regarding the proposed OCP zoning amendment application for 3601 Olympian Way and 620 Medalist Way. These written submissions will be appended to the agenda. During public participation, members of the public will be provided an opportunity to present concerns or ask questions of council. Comments pertaining to the following matters that have been subject to a public hearing are prohibited at this meeting. Bylaw number 1898, Cannabis Retail 1905 Souk Road. Bylaw number 1908, CD 31, 3554 Ryder Heshtall. Bylaw number 1912, CD 32, 791 Drummond Way. Bylaw number 1913, CD 33, 2350 Souk Road. Under the authority of Council Procedural Bylaw number 1890, 20 minutes is allocated for public participation. Each participant will be granted 1 opportunity to speak for up to 2 minutes. Staff will be doing the timing and will notify you when that 2 minutes is up. When you begin, we ask that you please provide your name and street to confirm residency or property ownership. Colwood residents or property owners will be provided the first opportunity to speak. Debate with or any members of staff is not permitted. The following conduct will not be accommodated: outbursts or criticisms aimed at individuals or groups, rude or offensive language or gestures, disruptive delay of the conduct of our business, questioning the motives of any person, expressing a negative opinion about the personality or character of any person, speaking disrespectfully about or acting aggressively towards any person. When your allocated time is up, your microphone will be muted. We ask that you please respect other speakers and remain within the 2-minute time frame. We have, as I said, I believe we have 4 people online and we have 1 person in person. So you are welcome to come up first if you want and do that, or you can have others present, totally up to you. If you could just hit your the little red button to turn your mic on for us. There you go.
There we are.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, my name is Eric Kapler, and my address, although it does not reside within the city of Colwood, is 2665 Traverse Terrace, and that's the property bordered by Mills Creek, site of the 1764 Island Highway development. I'm going to try and work through this within the time frame allotted. I'll do my best. I've got about 1.5 pages to read from. This is the redevelopment variance permit 22-003. The QEP report associated with variance application does not do enough to assure environmental stakeholders and stakeholders within the range of impacts for the project that potential environmental damage from drainage alteration, light disruption, soil disturbance from mechanical means, and noise pollution from construction and future tenants will not have a lasting and adverse or knock-on effect on the wildlife corridor and its surrounding residents. Additionally, altering the shoreline, specifically land that makes up a graded area leading to a waterway, removes the protective travel corridor that many species rely on in their journey between land and water. Not only is the developer seeking to add extra 3 retaining walls to the initial design, they are also seeking to add extra mass to those walls at points on the site which have the greatest risk of related soil disturbance in the riparian zone from excess geomatic loading. There is currently no information pertaining to how extra loading from backfill will affect natural drainage. Therefore, the conclusion by development services is premature because it cannot accurately predict land disturbance, including but not limited to natural drainage, natural light disturbance, and environmental risk to salmon population from proposed structural design changes. Furthermore, the application is incomplete with respect to technical details. The recommendation letter specifies a grade variance of around 30 meters, whereas the Development Services and Planning Department states a 20-meter variance. This information needs to be consistent to prevent any engineering miscalculations. A window of error of 10 meters is not insignificant. The site development plan. Okay, so in sum up, I would motion that council address the concerns by way of have fish habitat specific environmental impact study with the inclusion of wildlife setback, where a qualified stream consultant could undertake a biological inventory for the purpose of wildlife corridor plan. Of note, the abandoned site next to Lecker Foods has been sitting that way for about 6 years or so. And it's got a lot of dunnage, a lot of waste there. It's home to transient drug use. And it doesn't seem there's a lot of environmental accountability at the location. So I'm hesitant and I'm not alone with this. A lot of the residents in the area that's affected by this development have concerns about light pollution and noise pollution affecting the stream population. Mr. Ian Bruce of Peninsula Stream Society, I've been in contact with him in regards to those concerns, and he suggested that I come to you to address those today.
Right. So I very much appreciate it. I do apologize that 2 minutes does go quite quickly for us. What I would encourage you to do though, too, is if you have those written, to send it to corporate services at colwood.ca, or you can give it to Marcy, and she'll ensure that council sees your entire remarks. So thank you for coming out. Staff, I will go to the second. Bless you, Councillor Kobayashi. The second person online, please.
Thank you. Can we have L. John Alexander unmute? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is John Alexander. My address is 26 Bastion Square in Victoria, and I am counsel for the Olympic View property owners. I provided council with a letter of today's date that sets out the substance of the urging that I wish to put upon you this evening when you consider, in particular, item 7.4, the zoning amendment bylaw for the Olympic View property. My request on behalf of Olympic View is that when you consider first reading of the zoning bylaw, that you remove section 10.6.3.4 in order to remove the additional community amenity contribution requirement that in my submission contravenes your own policy adopted a month ago today, I believe. My reasons for that request are set out in further detail in my letter. In summary, the bylaw does not provide for new density and does not provide for additional units. In fact, the bylaw, in my interpretation, adds a burden on the very form of housing that it should be preferring, in that the section I refer to adds additional community amenity contributions on apartment construction. Arguably, by allocating the density that I set out on page 2 of my letter, which previously was 341 units across the Colwood portion of this property, into 217 units, reduction to 217 of non-apartment, and then 124 now restricted to apartment, it's allocating density to a lower use that could in fact be considered a downzoning of a sort. It constrains the property.
You're at the 2 minute mark, thanks.
And that's the basis for this request.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go to our next caller, staff.
Thank you. Peter de Schwager is next, please. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. It's Peter de Schwager from Olympic View Developments, 679 Medalist Avenue. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening to items 6.1 and 6.2 on the agenda. OV would like to clarify a few points that came up in last week's committee of the whole meeting that we didn't have an opportunity to speak to at the time. Firstly, there was a request for a car share amenity in both the proposed buildings. Having done some more research, it became clear that there currently isn't a provider of car share service in Colwood. Evo doesn't operate on the West Shore, though it does operate in Victoria. We had discussions with Moto, and they are currently doing a feasibility study on our proposed projects to determine if the demand within the area will allow for the rideshare venture to be sustainable. Moto is currently in Langford, but not in Colwood, and we would hope to have their analysis in the coming weeks to share with staff and council. Moto did, however, recommend that we advise council that the way to make car share more viable is to reduce the parking requirements within buildings to force change on the public by making it more challenging on 2-vehicle condo owners to park. Change will not happen by building large parking garages for multiple vehicle owners. Secondly, to follow up on what John has stated in the new CACs being applied, OV has no objection to new CACs applying to new density, but we do expect consultation with the development community about them and how they are contemplated being applied to existing density. Langford, for example, is applying new CACs to new density requested at OV. OV does not take issue with newly proposed CACs that were discussed, with newly proposed CACs that were discussed at the February 14th council meeting being applied to our in-stream projects for 3601 Olympian Way and 620 Medalist Avenue. We applied for these projects in October of 2021. Don't in-stream projects typically have a grace period from new policy adoptions? Do these new CACs apply to new densities granted by the council in the past couple of years?
That's 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thirdly, OV proposes that since the density proposed at 3601 Olympian Way and 620 Medalist Avenue is not being considered new density, that we pay the previously paid agreed CACs in cash and apply a CAC credit for an agreed upon community amenity art installation at the VMP and Latoria intersection. Thank you, and we look forward to further discussions with Colwood about community amenities that OV is going to be providing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I believe we have one caller left.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't see their name, but I do see someone else in attendance. And just in case that's them, I'd like to call Carly or Jeremy Helm.
If you are online, please unmute yourself. We don't want to miss you.
Doesn't look like they're in attendance.
So what we'll do is we'll move forward. If they come on in the next 5 minutes, or if for some reason they unmuted, I certainly don't mind bringing this back to council and allowing them to share their comments. But otherwise, we will move forward. So that takes us to 6.1. This is the OCP zoning amendment application 3601 Olympian Way. This is a recommendation from the committee of the whole meeting of March 7th. Council. Councillor Parkinson, and my apologies, I got to remember how to do this.
Me too.
Good.
Obviously, we've had some concerns raised by Mr. Alexander and Mr. Deswager. Obviously, and in my opinion, the time to address these differences is now, not in the future. So I believe we should defer these applications until we can get our lawyers to advise us whether legally we're doing anything wrong, get our senior staff to talk about procedurally if we're doing anything wrong. And then I think the issue of fairness, which is sort of makes the backbone of most of the complaints, that's obviously comes to council table, and we'll define what fairness is for us. So I'd like to move a deferral for that further information.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to look to staff. Just again, I'm always just confused when it comes to referrals and deferrals. So a deferral that Councillor Parkinson has just moved, if I get a seconder to that, is there a discussion, or is a deferral not discussed?
Are you wanting to defer to another meeting for further information?
Correct.
Yeah, you would need a seconder for that.
Yeah, no, I will
And
get
then
a
there would be
seconder
no
in a
further
second. I'm
discussion.
clarifying what we
Yeah.
do post.
Yeah.
What do we do post?
So once that's gone, if that goes through, then there's no further discussion on the item.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I have a motion to defer. Do I have a seconder to that motion?
I'm seconding, Mayor.
Oh, thank you. Councillor excuse me, I'm sorry, Councillor Day has seconded that. Sorry, I'm gonna just turn off your mic just for a second, Michael, just because, or Councillor Baxter, just because I'm gonna end up calling the vote. So I call the vote immediately, correct? All right, so motion to defer, those in, I'll go in favor, please. Please raise your hands if you are in favor of the deferral. We have 3. Those who oppose the deferral. 1, 2, 3. The deferral fails.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, can you check
Excuse
your voting? Because the hands aren't being brought down, so I think you counted me at both times.
I'm sorry, Councillor Day, could you just say that again? I was having a hard time hearing you.
Well, you're not lowering my hand after I've raised it, so I think you may have counted me twice there.
Oh, okay, I don't have control actually of you, your hand.
Okay, I will put it up and put it down myself then. I just would like to be assured that I'm actually being considered.
Yes, yeah, so yeah, I will read out the votes. So those who supported the motion was Councillor Parkinson, Councillor Kobayashi, Councillor Day. Those who opposed it was Councillor Logan, Councillor Baxter, and Mayor Martin.
So that would be defeated then because it's a tie vote?
Correct.
Thank you.
Do I have another motion? Oh, excuse me, Councillor Baxter.
Do you want a motion before we?
No,
speak?
you can, no,
Okay. I think it's unfortunate for Councillor Parkinson's motion that he didn't say more about it before, but we didn't have discussion before he actually made the motion. I think that's something I will certainly bear in mind if I'm making a motion to defer at any time. Have the discussion first, then make the motion, because there's no discussion after you've made the motion. For my part, I have absolutely no concerns that we're doing anything illegal in what is proposed right now, because I'm absolutely certain staff would have told us by now. They've had plenty of time to think about it. But at the same time, despite having disagreed with Mr. Alexander many times in the last 25 years, I actually kind of agree with him this time. And I think it's extremely unusual to see a rezoning that doesn't increase density. Or
Excuse me, point of order, Mr. Mayor. This is discussion on a motion that has already been carried.
Okay. So I'm sorry, that's, so
I'm not discussing the motion to defer right now.
no. So as long as we're not discussing the deferral, we're fine.
Right. I did it first, so I
Yes, so,
apologize for
yeah,
that.
so you can't be talking about the deferral.
So it's extremely unusual to see rezonings that don't change use or density. So this is a really odd one. And because there is no increase in density, there's no increase in value through change of use, but there is actually a decrease in value because the same number of units is intended to be built, but they will actually be cheaper units than had they been townhouses. So for that reason, I think it's only fair that we keep the CAC rates the same.
This is again on, this is, what are we on the agenda?
We're Councillor Day, we're on 6.1. Councillor Parkinson made a motion to defer 6.1. That motion failed. So Councillor Baxter is speaking to 6.1.
Yeah, you can't speak to it after it's been referred.
No, it failed. The referral failed.
Okay, I see. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
Please continue.
I'm quite certain that there will be further rezonings on this entire site, which will increase density, and definitely when that happens, we we would impose the new CAC rates. But in addition to that, I understand that the large building is to be a rental building, the larger of the two. And whereas we normally with rental buildings will require a covenant that they be rented for 10 years, I'd like to propose something different this time around, which is for staff to report back the next time we consider this on the idea that we rezone that particular building, that particular area for rental only. I'm asking for this report because we've never discussed that and we need more information on it. In the meantime, I will move the bylaws as they currently are. If that's the right time to do that, should we do that?
Yes, no, that's great. I just want to clarify something though with you. Just because what I heard from you. 6.1, and Mr. Earl, please correct me if I'm wrong, but 6.1, the motion that is before us would be the new policy in regards to amenities, not the old policy. So I think you would need to say that you're suggesting that it's the old policy that should take effect, not what was in the motion that said it would be the new policy.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, there should have been.
Okay, so you're basically moving the motion, but with us looking at accepting it from the old amenity charge policy.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder to that motion? Councillor Day has fallen off. Councillor Day, are you there? You are there. Did
Sorry,
you have your
I'm-
hand up, Councillor Day? I couldn't tell.
No, I did not.
You did not. Okay. So I do not have a seconder to that either. Just for discussion. Okay. If I may just bring up something, I'm just thinking this through. I'm afraid that we're going to be 3-3 throughout this. And if that's the case, then perhaps that first motion was the most appropriate if we're going to just be stuck here all evening. So I don't want us to go around in circles and circles and circles. We do have that motion in place, so we could definitely have that discussion. And I guess I will, but then I guess I'll come back. Looking to staff, is it appropriate or inappropriate to do a second deferral if there was a second motion in place? If as the conversation continued, or once you make a deferral motion once, is that it on this item?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. A motion to defer cannot interrupt a motion that's currently on the floor.
Thank
But
you.
once you're done with that, if that's something that you want to choose to bring forward, you can.
Okay, great, thank you. So I will go back to Councillor Baxter. This is your motion, not your motion. You were the mover. Do you have anything further? Okay, yeah, sorry. Councillor Kobayashi, do you have anything you wish to add? Let me add you.
I'm basically totally confused right now, to tell you the truth. You know, it's there's a couple of issues that bother me here because reading the letter, and I don't know if this is, we can discuss this in public or if this has to be in camera or what, because it is a legal issue, sort of. Well, it's not legal per se, but came from a lawyer talking about a potential legal issue here. So I just want to make sure I'm clear before I start talking about it here.
Sorry, and Councillor Kobayashi, are you referring to the letter that we received from Mr. Alexander earlier today?
Correct. That's correct.
So let's staff.
Not quite understanding where the conversation may go.
I would like to reference that letter, but you know,
Administration does not currently see any legal reason why you might want to take this conversation in camera.
Okay.
However, if you wander into that territory, we will alert
Okay, thank you very much. Just wanted to make sure. So, you know, one of the things that's really confusing me, and it would make me happier, mind you, but in the letter, he references affordable housing, and that was his last line. And I caught that. That one didn't float by me. And when he said that, I went, oh, does this mean what I think it means? And I wasn't too sure. Like, rentals do not equate to affordable. And so if he's talking that the intention is that this is affordable housing, that's a game changer in my mind in how I would actually vote on this. So that's why I agreed with Councillor Parkinson's deferment. I'm not allowed to talk about that, but it's kind of weird. But that's what made it so interesting to me, because if I interpreted the letter correctly or incorrectly, that's what I'm not sure about right now. And it would certainly influence the way I voted on it. So, you know, and that's why I wanted some clarification and that discussion to happen and before we even table this. I think it's unfair at this point in time for me to vote on something when I don't know what I'm basically voting on right now. So that's where my head is, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. I will go to Mr. Earl, then Councillor Logan. Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in an effort to add whatever clarity it might, I believe the letter referenced that apartment style housing is a more affordable form of housing. It did not qualify the housing as affordable housing. It qualified the housing as a more affordable housing type than the alternate.
So, don't know.
Mr. Mayor, it's Mr. Alexander. If you want clarification, I can try to give it to you. I'm still on the line.
I'm sorry. Certainly. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe the Chief Administrative Officer is correct. The point being made in the letter is that this is a shift to a more affordable form of housing, providing more apartment-style living and less the larger single-family suburban type of development. That's the point that's made in the letter. And to be perfectly clear, there's no threat of anything being done here illegal or unlawful. I was asked to make some points on behalf of my clients with respect to land use planning, fairness, and policy application. Please don't take the fact that the letter comes from me to mean that I'm on the warpath against Colwood, although I know I have that reputation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Logan, then Councillor Day.
The councillor is muted.
Cannot hear Councillor Logan.
Sorry, you can't hear Councillor Logan?
No.
Right, Councillor Logan, go ahead and talk now. See if you can. Anything? Can you hear him at all?
No.
Okay, Councillor Logan, let's move you to Councillor Jansen's mic and let's see if that helps. No. Sorry, I got to throw you out. Let's try that. Hello? Oh, there we go. Can you hear him?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. I did want to crack a joke being, sitting in Councillor Jansen's spot now, but anyways, nonetheless, I think I appreciate where my friend was coming from with this motion, but I think we need to recognize that there's some value for the developer in consolidating the density in those two buildings. And that value is the cost of construction, of course, but also frees up the opportunity for the developer to possibly come in for a rezoning and for additional density. And so I think there needs to be a recognition that with that value, there should be some value that's attached and transferred to the residents as well through a community amenity fee. And I also recognize that, you know, this project's been on the books for over 20 years. And a lot of what we're considering were applied 20 years ago. And things have changed, resident demands and expectations have changed as well. And I think, you know, whether the new fees are appropriate in this case or not, I'm not sure. But I believe there has to be a recognition that the old rates are not appropriate, and these community amenity fees are something that, as I understand the rules, can be negotiated. And so what I certainly what I would recommend is that the developer connect with staff and come up with a number that is mutually acceptable. Maybe not the top, definitely not the bottom from my perspective. And then we can go from there. So I won't be supporting the motion. I would support a motion to defer now that we've been able to have that conversation, and it would allow staff and the developer to have further conversation in terms of community amenity fees and stuff as such. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I would, I will leave it for now. The point has been addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson. Did you not want to make that? Oh, you didn't want to do it? Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. My apologies. No, you're right. You're right. No, my apologies. I was being presumptuous. How dare me. Okay, I'm going to call the vote. Staff, could staff please lower Councillor Day's hand? Thank you. So the motion presently is what is before us, with the change that it is the old amenity charge or fees, excuse me. Those in opposition, please raise your hands. We have Councillors Parkinson, Logan, Kobayashi, Mayor Martin. So that motion fails. Councillor Parkinson. Oh,
Councillor Day is
did
also.
I count? Sorry, did I not count? Did I not say Councillor Day? My apologies. Councillor Day opposes as well. I'm sorry, Councillor Parkinson.
With all due modesty, I'd like to move a deferral and ask staff for input on the legal, procedural, and fairness issues relating to implementing the new CAC charges on these two projects at Olympic View.
So, and just to be clear, so you're talking 6.1 and 6.2.
If I may.
Okay. And just for staff, before I look for a seconder, is it okay if I put both together, or do I need to do two separate motions for deferral? Councillor Parkinson has suggested to defer both 6.1 and 6.2. Can I leave that as one motion?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. May I have a seconder, please? Second by Councillor Kobayashi. No discussion. Those in opposition. There's no discussion. Okay, I will call the question.
Mayor Martin, I'm sorry, we're stuck on Councillor Parkinson.
Sorry.
Can't hear you.
So Councillor Day, we are, I'm calling the vote right now. So all I'm looking for is if you are in opposition to defer. Are
Yes,
do you oppose deferral?
No, I'm not opposing the deferral. I'm trying to tell you that you are not on camera and you couldn't be heard by the people on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. Okay, those in opposition, Councillor Baxter. So those two motions are deferred, which will take us to 6.3. Ms. Hempting. Ms. Hempting, we can't hear you if you're talking.
What is happening?
We can hear that.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, this is interesting. Bear with me 1 second. Zoom is telling me that I am muted and that my video is not on. But you can hear me. Can you see me?
I can't see you, but I do have a circle spinning for your presentation.
Okay, 1 second.
Yep.
Ah, you have a face.
Getting closer. There you go.
Okay. I trust you can see me, you can hear me, and you can see the budget 2022 slide deck.
We can in chambers.
And on Zoom.
Wonderful, wonderful. Because this draft budget has been underway since about November, so I'd really hate to hold us up at this point. So tonight we have the draft financial plan bylaw before us for introduction, and later on in the agenda, it is scheduled for the first 3 readings. Before we get to that, I did want to take a moment, one, to recap the changes that have been reflected in the documentation that's before you this evening, and also a very brief recap of what has been covered throughout both service review and budget deliberations. And of course, pleased to answer any questions along the way. We'll start with a summary. So both a summary of the 2022 balanced budget, both operating and capital, as well as an overall breakdown of where the current 2022 property tax increase is. So starting with the chart on the left, when we last met, the proposed tax increase was 4.81%. On March 1st, committee made a recommendation that the budget to fund the potential policing e-com dispatch, that budget be deferred until 2023. Committee on March 1st also made the recommendation that we reinstate the Colwood cleanup program. The draft budget that's before you tonight does propose that the Colwood cleanup event be reinstated for 2022. It also proposes for council's consideration that to the extent that fees do not fully fund the Colwood cleanup event, council may wish to consider funding the difference, the shortfall in what the fees don't cover by way of the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant. For that reason, there was no implication on the draft budget with respect to the tax increase to support the Colwood cleanup event. So to recap, we are proposing full utilization of our anticipated new construction taxation. That's currently estimated at $1.2 million, and we will be able to confirm that estimate later this month, early April. So we're proposing to utilize that funding, 3/4 to fund both previously approved and new service increases, as well as to fund an increased transfer to our reserves for purposes of sustainable asset management. I will pause if there's any questions on what's driving the draft tax increase as it sits today. Otherwise, I'll jump straight into an overview of both the revenues and the operating expenses by way of our service areas.
Councillor Day?
I just wanted to ask, what was the shortfall that we anticipate won't be covered? And I know it's a ballpark because it's been 2 years, but we could even use the last spring cleanups numbers.
Absolutely, through your worship. We anticipate, the budget reflects an anticipated shortfall of just shy of $28,000. And I will just preface this by saying, as was highlighted in the staff report on this agenda item, we are proposing that rather than adjust fees that have already been advertised, rates that have already been advertised for this year's event, that we proceed with this event with the rates that were previously charged last in 2019. And if activity is somewhat similar to the last event we held, we do anticipate that shortfall to be in the neighborhood of $28,000. And so this budget proposes that in 2022, the shortfall be funded by way of the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant, and that we revisit and propose revised fees by way of the 2023 service review later this year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson?
Thank you, Worship. A couple things. Firstly, I think, as I understand this, that this budget takes our contributions to the sustainable infrastructure back on track, and that we can say that this council has actually met its commitments under the award that we got in our early days as a council, that we're back to having fully funded it, even though we cut it out of 1 year's budget. And then the other question I have is, I know the COVID restart funds came with a bunch of strings attached, and are you confident that the COVID cleanup falls within those strings?
Thank you, through your worship. To answer the first question, yes, so specifically the 1.81% of the new construction taxation that we are proposing, we transfer directly to reserves. That will make up for the compounding effect of the fact that we did not have a tax increase to support the Sustainable Infrastructure Reserve in 2020. So it will, in a sense, get us caught up. The second part of your question, is it an eligible use of the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant? Yes, we believe it is an eligible use of the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant. One of the eligible expenditures of that grant type is that to address revenue shortfalls. The team, following committee's direction to us on March 1st, did review and have a discussion about potential fee increases. Given that this event has not been held in 2 years, given that we do anticipate there may be an increase in demand for this event, in part as the result of the pandemic and the fact that we have been unable to hold an event to provide that service over the last 2 years, we do believe it is an approved use of this grant funding. That being said, it's not a sustainable tactic for us to follow. And so we are, as we've mentioned in the staff report, recommending that it be a one-time utilization, and that we both return with proposed fees that would be sufficient to cover the cost of this service, but then also that will enable us to have the notification for the community that the fees would be increasing. Like I've mentioned, we have previously stated the existing fee rates for the upcoming event next month.
Okay. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Just a clarification, Jen, just further to Councillor Parkinson's question. So we 1% of our tax increase is due to the infrastructure replacement fund that we have, reserve fund. So is there another percent that was from the year that we had to catch up? So is our actual net tax increase without that, would it be 2.3%? I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
Certainly. Thank you for that question. Through your worship, 3.3% is the tax increase to support existing and increased services before we consider increased transfers to reserves. So not I believe 3 that you just mentioned, but 3.3%. We're then proposing to increase taxes an additional 2.81%. That 2.81% is taxation that will be transferred to the Sustainable Infrastructure Reserve. And a portion of that will be funded through the new construction taxation, which is why the total tax increase, 3.3% to support existing and increased services, plus an additional 1% increase to support our annual 1% increase for sustainable infrastructure. We're also proposing that we take the equivalent of what would be a 1.81% increase. We're going to use the new construction taxation and set that aside. As Councillor Parkinson mentioned, that will help us get caught up and will mitigate the fact that we did not make that transfer in 2020. And of
Okay,
course,
Yeah, I understand now. I'm clear now. So
Great.
that's our growth dividend here. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. No more hands. You can continue.
great, thanks. So just take a moment. So overall, we have a $53 million capital and operating budget. When we look at our total revenues, the majority of the city's revenues are derived by both property taxation and PILT. A third of our revenues this year are represented by developer contributions. And now it may be helpful to look, so page 18 on the draft financial plan document, that provides the overall consolidated budget. The majority of the developer contributions are road development cost charges that the city is utilizing for eligible road DCC projects, as well as cash contributions that are either contributions to infrastructure works in the city or into the city's reserves. So for purposes of affordable housing or community amenities. Both developer contributions and government grants tend to fluctuate annually depending on the projects that are being proposed and in which those revenue funding sources are tied to. User fees, primarily derived of both building, development, engineering related user fees that fund activity in those areas. Sewer user fees, funding the sewer utility, and then other sources primarily comprised of the investment earnings. And again, we spoke about investment earnings in a previous budget meeting, but the majority of those are attributed to the city's reserve funds and provide some of the funding to those annual reserve transfers. I will pause if there's any questions on revenue. Otherwise, I'll move into an overview of our operating expenses and our service area delivery decisions.
Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Just a quick question, Jen, through the mayor. Of that property tax, are we still at the same levels as far as residential / versus commercial? Are we still at the sort of that 93-94% residential and the rest being commercial? Is that sort of the breakdown, or are we getting worse? Is it more residential this year? I would assume that's what's happening.
So we are in terms of the split of the composition of our property taxation, and this chart is provided on the draft financial plan bylaw, which is a separate attachment on the agenda. Based on preliminary BC assessment information that we have with this budget that's before you, we're anticipating residential will represent just over 76% of our property taxation, and the business and other class represents just over 20%.
Okay, thank you very much.
I don't see any other hands. We can keep going.
So we turn to operating expenses. A couple of items I want to highlight here. We have what we refer to as our core operating expenses. We then include our special initiative budgets, which are operating in nature, but they typically are one time. This chart excludes the special initiative budgets, which is why it doesn't agree to the totals on the draft bylaw that's before you. Lastly, the draft bylaw also includes estimated amounts for amortization. I'll get into that when we introduce the financial plan bylaw. I wanted to highlight this chart because it gives a quick snapshot of where our operating expenses, what the breakdown is between the city's service areas. And so it helps provide just a little added context when we look at where our dollars. And so again, these operations are funded by both taxation and user fees, but it just gives a high level overview. And so a quick recap of each of our service areas. So the areas of what's referred to local government language, general government. So administration and corporate services, direction was to maintain the service delivery. Council has resolved to increase the funding support for the Pacific Center Family Services Association Community Outreach and Prevention Program. Human Resources, Council's resolved to maintain the service delivery with a previously approved increase that is represented by the HR coordinator, who was introduced earlier this year. Communications, resolved to maintain service delivery. Same with finance and IT, with a previously approved increase in the area of IT, as well as enhanced asset management proposed for introduction in 2023. I will pause if there's any questions in these areas, or I will move through each of the rest.
No, I don't see any hands. You can keep going.
Protective services. When we look at our protective services, that's actually a roll-up of policing, fire, and building and bylaw services for the city. With policing, Council's resolved to maintain the service delivery. We have previously approved an increase in RCMP strength, which would bring us to a member count of 20.6. This draft financial plan also proposes an increase in strength of 1 additional member for each of 2023, 24, 25, and 26. March 1st, direction was given to defer the increased funding for the ECOM dispatch. Since that time, I have not yet received any further direction on that. But of course, as it comes in, we will be reporting back to Council. And so to be clear, as was mentioned during the last budget meeting, should that transition occur in 2022, staff will return with proposed funding options for that change if it should arise this year. Fire rescue. During service review, we did resolve to increase service delivery. We have both a previously approved career firefighter increase. We also have the new paid on call program implementation. I will pause if there's any questions or discussions surrounding either of these areas.
Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I see we all agreed to increase the RCMP strength in 2022. What's our level of commitment to the further increase of 1 officer annually for the next, I guess, 4 years it would be?
Thank you for that question, through your worship. We are required, so once this financial plan bylaw is adopted, we do in writing commit to any service changes within their next fiscal year, so 2022 and into 2023. So to answer your question directly, the increase for this year is already committed, was previously approved. The increase that's proposed for 2023, I would suggest if that is not endorsed by Council, that change be made with this financial plan. Beyond 2023, we have the ability to review those as timed with the service reviews. But I would suggest that any change slated for 2023 would be a commitment upon adoption of this financial plan bylaw.
Yeah, and I guess that's my concern is that a big supporter of the RCMP and we know that, you know, they do great things in the community, but we also know that it looks like Metchosin will be joining with some costs to pay. We know there's been some pushback for the province about their contribution for their obligations. And if we set a sort of base within our 5-year financial plan of whatever, it really becomes a little more tricky to walk that back, whatever the circumstances may be. It's just a question of whether we're going to commit to, you know, something high or something low. And this year we had a fulsome discussion and agreed to fund one officer. And I suppose it's probably not the preferred method for the RCMP to do that on an annual basis. But again, if we commit, you know, one officer a year for the next foreseeable future, that probably becomes our minimum. So I guess I have some concerns that maybe we would be in a better position to sort of say one officer every second year for sure, and then let's kind of see what the future holds. But frankly, I fear I won't have much support at the table, so I'll wait to see if there's any discussion here.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter. And then Dave.
I think I heard two different things from Ms. Hepting and from Councillor Parkinson, so I just want to confirm. At the moment, we are currently committed to the extra officer for the 22 to 23 financial year for the RCMP. If we adopt this budget, then we will be committing to the extra officer for the 23-24 financial year. And beyond that, we are not committed. So we are not committing with this budget for 5 years, but we will be committed from now until March 2024. Is that right?
Through your worship, no, not through to March 2024. The implication that I highlight is in recent years, we have shifted so that our commitment and our strength authorization is effective January 1st. And so I suggest that we really want to consider the January 1st of year 2, so 2023, January 1st. Right now, this financial plan proposes a commitment of another strength increase, moving us from the 20.6 to the 21.6.
Okay.
That.
But we're not committing for 5 years.
Correct. We would have the ability to adjust our budget and therefore adjust whatever our commitment is. Simply put, when we make a commitment and we authorize that strength, we do that in a conversation and in documentation on an annual basis. But because of the timing of the authorization, January 1st, I really advise that we are both certain of year 1, which in this case is already previously approved, and year 2. Any proposed budgets for year 3, 4, and 5 under this financial plan, we would have the ability to amend those budgets by way of the annual service review and or the annual budget deliberations.
Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Thanks. So I am in agreement that we just have a lot of unknowns when it comes to our policing costs. We have the 911 dispatch, which we still don't know, even though arguably I think we should have known by now whether or not we're on the hook for that. And we also have the increased strength that we've already signed up for, but we've also heard from the inspector that it's becoming increasingly difficult to attract new members here because of the price of cost of living here in BC and the difficulty in attaining home ownership. So I really do think it would be advisable to look at certainly doing the one that we can get this year, and then maybe do a mid-year hire in 2023 in March after we understand what our situation is going to be financially for making that increase.
Okay, thank you. I guess we'll keep going, or do you want a motion right now on this subject? What's easier?
If council would like a motion at this point, I'm pleased to receive one. Otherwise, there will be an opportunity to consider both the staff recommendation and any other recommendations council wishes to make.
Okay, Councillor Perkins.
What I heard was that our commitments are essentially rock solid for 2022 and 2023. That will give us time to discuss this in the future.
Great, thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so let's keep going.
Moving into the area of building and bylaw.
I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you just for a second. Councillor Day, your hand's up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just, what I heard Councillor Parkinson say was incorrect. We are rock solid for 2023, but 2024 is a question mark because of the January 1st timeline. So because we won't have our new budget in place until about this same time next year, and January is before March. So the opportunity to change anything is now for 2023.
Did you wish to make a motion, Councillor Day?
Sure, I would make the motion that we defer the decision on a new member in 2023 to budget deliberations.
Budget deliberations for the 2023 budget?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Do I have a seconder to that deferral motion? I do not. That motion fails. Or not fails, but I guess it doesn't land on the table. Anything else, Councillor Day?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Then Ms. Hampton.
Thank you. So moving into the area of building and bylaw, direction was to maintain service delivery, as was the direction given in the area of community planning. Engineering, maintain service delivery. This budget does support enhanced GIS services, effective 2023. Development services, direction was to maintain service delivery. I'll pause if there's any questions on these areas. Otherwise, we'll move into the public works related areas.
I don't see any hands.
So in the areas of public works, council direction was to increase branch drop-off and to reinstate the Colwood cleanup program. The financial implications of both of those two actions have been incorporated into this draft budget before you. Direction was to maintain all other public works service delivery. In the area of roads, direction was to maintain service delivery with the previously approved increase in bike lane maintenance. In the area of boulevards, direction was to increase boulevard beautification. That was a previously approved increase under the 21 service review. As was discussed during this year's budget deliberations, that increase has been deferred to 2023. Storm sewers, maintain service delivery with the previously approved increased closed storm sewer system maintenance. And lastly, sewer utility, direction to maintain service delivery.
I'm not seeing any hands. Oh, sorry. Yes, I do. Councillor Baxter.
I just want to get clear something that was discussed a little bit at the last meeting about the way funds had been budgeted for last year and not spent, and were either being asked for this year, or should I say, the funds have been budgeted for last year and either underspent or not spent at all in the case of the storm sewer ponds maintenance. And then this year, it appeared in some budgets that there was a larger amount being asked for this year, despite having underspent last year. And so I added up all of the public works budgets, which is public works, general, roads, parks, boulevards, storm sewers, 2021 actuals, so what was actually spent in 2021, and compared it to what we have proposed in the budget for 2022, and it is almost exactly a 3.5% increase of 2022 budgets over 2021 actuals, which is the same as the general budget increase, ignoring the sustainable infrastructure fund. So I just wonder if you could confirm that my calculations are correct, which would indicate that there is no significant increase in total public works request as compared to last year. It's just the general 3.5% increase.
Thank you, through your worship. There's a couple comments I'd like to make in the area of the public works related operating budgets. To start, it is helpful. And so we did provide some comment and a more thorough conversation on this when we introduced these areas during the 22 service review. One item we need to keep in mind is that of, as we continue to refine these public works areas, the 2022 operating budgets are the first where staff were able to articulate the FTE count in each service area. And as a result, reconfirm the labor budgets for each of these areas. Previously, the majority of the benefit budgets, again, we've kind of been on this journey of reconfirming and defining these public works related areas for about 2 years now. And prior to the 2022 budget compilation, the bulk of the benefits was maintained within the public works administration budget. So as we created and refined the operating budgets headed into the 22 service review, we distributed those benefit budgets, which led to some skews when you compared, what was being proposed in these areas versus what the budget was in the specific service area last year. So that one factor I wanted to highlight again, because that does lead to that. To directly answer your question, a 3.5% increase, it's not exactly that figure, but the point that Councillor Baxter is making is correct in that when we consider the redistribution between these areas, the largest swings beyond kind of our core tax increase have been defined as increased services specifically pertaining to branch drop-off and to reinstating the Colwood cleanup. And to continuing, excuse me, with the increased funding that's necessary to support the closed storm sewer system maintenance. Another factor that has been highlighted during service review and that I will reiterate, there were quite substantial increased budgets necessary to support the anticipated increased maintenance costs in the parks and trails service area. We've been talking for a few years now about the anticipated additional maintenance activity that will be required in the Royal Bay area in particular. That responsibility did not transition as we expected in 21. It has since transitioned. And so a large driver for why the Parks and Trails operating budget came in underspent in 21 was simply because we weren't servicing those areas as expected. The washroom facility, we recently had a grand opening for that in the Royal Bay area. So you can be assured that, you know, the maintenance associated with both that facility and the new parks in that area, those works will be required in 2022. And we do anticipate we will, excuse me, require the operating budget that has been proposed. And as well, there was a number of service increases endorsed in the 2021 service review, and those ultimately were actioned, but some of them were actioned later in the year due to a variety, both ensuring that we could get the staff in place, but also competing priorities. And so we did highlight that as well as an additional factor for why we came in underspent in 21, but why we now that we have actioned those increased service levels, that we do anticipate that spend in 22. Simply put, we do anticipate requiring the proposed operating budgets that are before you in these areas.
Thank you.
Councillor Day?
Thank you. I think my question's been answered.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands. Does something?
Thank you. So moving into the area of parks, recreation, and culture. Direction was to maintain service delivery in this area. We have proposed an increase related to the irrigation for parks and trails maintenance, as well proposed an increase for the Greater Victoria Green Team's fee for service, so we can increase the number of events that this volunteer organization supports in this area. And then I just commented on not assuming some of the maintenance responsibility. Again, we will be making that spend in this year as we have assumed that responsibility.
Thank you.
And with that, we've recapped our service areas. Our capital budget in total, just shy of $21 million. The majority of the spend proposed in 2022 is that of our road infrastructure. I will pause if there's any questions. Otherwise, I intend to just a quick recap of what is proposed to be spent in the next year on the city's capital program.
Councillor Day?
Thanks. Just from your slide there, the sewer infrastructure accounting for 2%. Does that include the sewage treatment costs, or I'm just finding that number kind of confusing?
Certainly, through your worship. So page 123 of the draft financial plan, no, these are the city's direct capital expenditures, and it is for the previously approved expansion in the area of Bexhill Place and the Painter Trail works, as well as the introduction of the lift station pump replacement program. CRD requisition sewer infrastructure not captured within the city's capital budget.
Okay, so when residents would like to look at the entire picture of their taxes, is there a place where they can be directed to see the whole basket, including our costs as well as the CRD costs?
Through your worship, certainly that's a great point. When we bring forward the tax rate bylaw for consideration, currently right now I don't have all of the costs that residents will be facing. We haven't yet received all of those final requisitions, but I will be in a position, and I can provide a similar graphic, and we can also make that available on our web in conjunction with the notice mail out. And then that will provide a complete picture of both the municipal taxes and where those go, but also the other taxes levied on behalf of the other jurisdictions.
Yeah, I think it would be really great. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands.
Thank you. And so I did want to highlight, staff have heard and received direction from council throughout these budget deliberations. And there are a number of related initiatives, and we've had some conversation about the implications of these initiatives, and that we will be returning to council for more fulsome discussions in a number of areas as it pertains to our capital spend. And so I did wish to highlight that. So specifically, we are looking at spend on facility infrastructure, in particular the public works proposed administration building. We will be returning to council with a more fulsome background on facility conditional assessment information before we seek recommendation and direction on that spend. Similarly, in the area of road infrastructure, we have a number of corridor reviews underway as relates to the active transportation plan. The budgets that have been proposed really are placeholder budgets until that design work is complete, and we will then return to council for a more fulsome discussion. I will pause if there's any questions in this area.
There is not.
In summary, reserves, I wanted to highlight, just for council's consideration, this budget proposes a transfer of $6.5 million to the city's reserves. This is approximately a $1.5 million increase over what we budgeted to transfer in 2021. We will be returning to council with staff have received the direction, as you know, during budget deliberations to return to council with a more deep dive on the current status of our reserves, how those reserves are funded, as well as what has been driving our both sewer and general operating surpluses. That information will return in conjunction with our 2021 financial statement update. And so lastly, we have a staff recommendation before you tonight. I have also heard discussion. The draft financial plan does reflect the financial implications of a proposed 1 RCMP strength each year. And so if council wished to make any recommended changes to the draft financial plan, I wish to receive that this evening, and we can then incorporate those changes into the draft bylaw prior to adoption.
Thank you. Are you, sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Ms. Hempting, are you done?
I am, thank you.
Okay, I will go to Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Worship. I'll move the recommendation as stated on the screen.
Great, thank you. Do I have a seconder to that? Second by Councillor Baxter. Discussion? Councillor Kobayashi.
Oh, thank you very much, Your Worship. Jen, did you say, I thought of printing out the entire package. Did you say the slide package was part of our package? Did I hear you say that?
Through your worship, no, this slide package was not published. It will be appended to the agenda after this meeting.
Okay.
What was published, an updated draft financial plan. And I do highlight the version control. It's a quick way on page 15 to see what has changed in that rather hefty document, and a staff report. And then later in the agenda, we have the draft financial plan bylaw for consideration for first 3 readings tonight.
Okay, thank you very much, Jen. I just again want to compliment you. We're getting better and better at this all the time. And I just wanted to compliment you on your leadership on this. This is a very difficult task, and lots of things are said, and it's never a personal attack of any sort. But I think you just did a marvelous job. I mean, it's certainly not where I wanted to be, but I guess I'm a little more conservative. I always feel that people are always looking for that growth dividend, right? So that you come out and we don't have to go beyond sort of the inflation rate. So, you know, you did a great job, but you know, you did as council had directed. And I just think you did a marvelous job. And I just want to thank you and your staff for all the hard work, because this was not fun. Well, maybe it was for you, but again, well done. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Councillor Day, then Baxter.
Thanks. I don't know if you would remember, Jen, but I was just thinking about our discussion with regards to the RCMP strength. And I believe when we had the presentation from the RCMP, we had a kind of a ballpark figure that they had one member per every so many population. I can't remember if I have it right or not. I thought it was about 1,700. But don't quote me on that. But I was just wondering if that might be a more useful way to look at our RCMP strength.
Thank you, through your worship. Yes, so you've heard reference to a COP per pop, 1 to 900. So it has been commented by our superintendent, 1 RCMP strength to 900 residents in Colwood. We did have a brief discussion during service review that with what was proposed under this financial plan, and if our growth maintained an average of 2.5% increase in our population annually, that we would more or less achieve that target by 2026. Now, whether or not that target of 1 to 900 is appropriate for the city of Colwood, that is something, of course, to be considered. But we did somewhat discuss that during service review. And if 1 to 900 is the target, if we did move to 24.6 and we grew at an average of 2.5% annually, we would hit that target by the end of this 5-year plan.
Thank you. So perhaps it would require more information to make a decision on the growth numbers. So if this motion carries tonight, I'm just wondering our next opportunity to change those numbers, if we so desired, would be 2024. Is that correct? So we're approving 2023 and 24 tonight. So it would be 2025.
To be clear, tonight council is considering 5-year financial plan 22 to 26. You have the ability tonight to direct staff to amend any budget. We will then return with an amendment. So presuming that we received first 3 readings tonight, should council wish to direct any budget in any year, we could return with that before adoption of this financial plan. If not, if we move with this financial plan as drafted, I would suggest that this council is committing to an increase of an additional 1 RCMP strength to 21.6 in 2023, their fiscal 23 and into 24, and that I would advise that council will have the ability to consider any further strength changes this fall, assuming service review is later this fall, and or during the 2023 budget deliberations. To be clear, if no.
Sorry, I'm just going to go to Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship. Administration is going to be returning to council on the 25th of April to work through a conversation with council on 2 things. 1, firming up an estimate of our best belief relative to the rate at which Colwood's population is going to grow over the next 3 decades. And 2, having a conversation about whether population is the best methodology to determine the size of our RCMP force, Colwood and our partners in the West Shore Detachment are in a position where we need to begin aggressively planning for a new structure as we've reached capacity of the existing building. To do that in the most effective way, trying to determine how big we're going to be in the future and how many police officers we need is one methodology we can use to scale the building. And so this council will have an opportunity in the next month to consider a population to police officer ratio and reflect upon what your best guess is with our advice, administration's advice, as to the scale at which our population is going to change. And so I believe you're going to have a fulsome conversation on this specific topic next month. That said, as Ms. Hepting has indicated, tonight we're seeking to go down a road to adopt a 5-year financial plan. Council can amend that plan next month. You traditionally do it once a year, and you overwrite the plan of the year before. And so you will create a new 2023 financial plan a year from now, and you will overwrite the old one. That said, this current plan has an RCMP officer additional in each of the years 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26. That's at a pace substantially faster than a 1 to 900 pace. And arguably, it's a signal to the community, both RCMP community and community at large, that until this plan is overwritten, that is our plan. And it's a legally binding plan and a legal authority for administration to spend. And so while the commitment is much firmer in 22 and arguably the first part of 23, it is a commitment and a signal into the future.
Thank you. Councillor Day?
Thanks. So I'm just proposing to council that we are rather locked into a plan. Well, we still have a lot of information coming forward, and this may indeed be the plan that we end up believing is the right one to follow. But I have a tendency to like to hedge my bets, and I would like to be able to make that decision after I have all the information. So I would like to have seen us at least allow for consideration of slowing down the pace at which we increase our RCMP in a time where we have so many costs coming our way, including a new building, including new staff, and including new population to look after in Colwood. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, sorry, I'd quite forgotten what I was. Yeah, I just want. I wanted to mention the version control and say thank you for the version control page. I have never seen one of those before in a financial plan, or I think any other plan, and it's a wonderful innovation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to call the question. We do have a motion on the table. Those in opposition to the motion? Nobody opposes. So that we will then move on to 6.4, which is Yasmin Hernandez, our planner, regarding development variance permit for 1764 Island Highway. Ms. Hernandez?
Hi there. Your Worship, I don't have a presentation put together for this evening. It is a fairly straightforward request from an applicant looking at the back of Building 3. I believe council has seen this application twice before, once with a rezoning application and then once before with a prior development variance permit in 2020 that looked at the need for retaining walls throughout the site. It's a steeply sloped site from Island Highway all the way back to soon to be Wilford Road and the Millstream Creek at the very back of the property. So upon preparation of building permit drawings and further in-depth geotechnical analysis and drawing preparation, it became the applicant became aware of the need for these additional retaining wall. So the development variance permit in 2020 did had a retaining wall located at the back of building 3, but it was not at that time not deemed to need a variance because it was going to be within the 1.2 meter height. However, having looked at the geotechnical considerations and the preloading of the site required for this construction of building 3, the applicant has come forward with a request for a variance that would allow the retaining wall to be up to 3.9 meters in height. So it won't be all through the back of the building at 3.9 meters, but at the highest points, at certain points, the highest point of the retaining wall will be 3.9, and it could be as low as 0.6 meters as it kind of goes through and around the building. But basically that is the short of the request is basically further investigation and detailed drawing review and preparation has revealed some challenges that are best overcome in the opinion of the applicant with an overheight retaining wall. As per the staff report, this property backs onto the stream environmental protection area of the stream. There is no public access at that portion of the creek. The creek is well shaded and is heavily treed at the edge of the creek. So there is very little visibility of these retaining walls, and they have been, the proposal is for using rock block, like rock, a rock wall. So we feel that aesthetically does break up the hardy plank or the finishing on the building, and it has very little impact on visibility from any street or public viewpoint. So that is the summary of my comments. I know the applicant is also joining us virtually. If were there be any comments for them. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I didn't see anything in your report about the site adaptive design or any enhancements or any identification of the trees that are being retained in that area. And we also had a participant at public participation who does visually see the site. They are across the creek, but there are lots of homes that may very well be impacted by the visual impact.
Through your worship to Councillor Day. So this application went through an environmental development permit application review back in 2020, concurrent with the prior development variance permit. And so basically that environmental review, it engaged a qualified environmental professional to go above and beyond provincial requirements. So no part of this building or retaining wall is located within the stream side protection area. So there is no trigger for any riparian requirements on this site. However, the applicant just the same engage a qualified environmental professional to conduct an assessment and to go above and beyond and prepare a replanting plan for the edge of the slope and to remove invasive species and replant along the edge prior to dedicating that portion of the land to the city. So we are satisfied that the environmental element and the protection of the stream has been satisfied under an environmental development permit. The details of that environmental development permit are public and they are available on our website. And I had the opportunity to speak to the gentleman that spoke earlier to you tonight, and I've made that documentation available to him. Will the people across the street from the creek be able to see a building? Probably. I mean, at this point, these are vacant lands that will soon accommodate a building. So I don't want to imply that it won't be visible. That said, it is minimally lit at the back. It is not a front of the building, so it's minimally lit just for security and safety around the exit. And I do not have site adaptive. It's not meant to constrict. Like the challenges with these site is that in front of it, in front of building 3, there will be Wilford Road and that extension of the road. And in order to enable a buildable area, there needs to be some retaining of the slope to enable buildable space. And so site adaptive is not meant to limit or constrain development to the point that it's unfeasible. We work with an applicant to identify areas of opportunity. And as I said, this applicant has gone above and beyond and provided a replanting scheme and dedication.
Is the replanting scheme on the website?
Yes, it is. It's part of the environmental development permit.
Great, thank you.
Anything else, Councillor Day?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter, then Parkinson.
Yeah, most of my questions have been answered. So I'm just going to make some comments if that's okay. Particularly repeating the fact that the proposed development is outside the streamside protection area. It's outside the SPIA. If you look at the map on page 3, there are a number of trees that are in the road right of way. When the road is pushed through, those trees will be gone because that's the road right of way. But the rest of the site doesn't have any trees on except closer to the stream, and they're all in the SPIA, so they'll be protected. So I don't see. I frankly don't understand the comments that were made by the member of the public that addressed us. But this process has a little way to go. And if the member of the public would like to contact me and explain further, I'd be happy to listen. But for now, I'll be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, like Michael, I was a little confused by some of the comments from the public. My understanding is that the retaining walls are to retain outside of the SPIA area and put the building at a height that works geometrically with access from Wilford Road and grades on parking lots, building that. So to my way of thinking, the retaining walls are to keep fill out of the SPIA area, and as such, are probably beneficial for the environment. There's an argument you could say, if we allow retaining walls, perhaps the building is going to be a little higher than ideal, and maybe there's a little heavier loading within the building footprint. I personally don't think that's going to affect the SPIA area or the environment very much. So, and I've never been overly fussed about heights of retaining walls. I wasn't around when the 1.2 maximum was initiated. I am a little concerned about the look of the retaining walls. And if I read the reports right, I'm not quite familiar with this kind of retaining wall. It seemed like stacked boulders stacked vertically and then a concrete wall poured on the outside of that. And we've heard that there are perhaps some sketchy characters hanging out in that part of the world at times. I think Yasmin talked about minimal lighting in that area. So is anything to be done to eliminate or at least best reduce graffiti on these walls?
Through your worship to Councillor Parkinson. So at this point, I was not aware that there was some issues about people in that area. I know at this point, because of the lack of access, because of Wilford Road not terminating properly, it does become perhaps a more inviting space, the property next to this particular development. And I would expect that when the road and when there's more building and presence on the property, that there's a deterrent for more activity on the lot adjacent to it. I can speak to the applicant and look into potential fencing. I know there will be no access to the back of this building, and I can investigate further for fencing potentially between this lot and the next one. Regarding graffiti, I'm not sure that graffiti is a problem. Like currently on these lots, there exist like no structures. But I might go on a site visit and make sure and investigate whether graffiti is indeed a problem.
Okay, well, when I walked that site with one or two of the other counselors, there was obviously indications of some people hanging out, at least, if not living down in that area. So I think there is the potential, and I can sympathize. There's going to be something built there. There's going to be a building to look at, but if we could minimize the graffiti, I think that's a step in the right direction. But otherwise, I'm going to support this application.
Thank you. So I don't have any first-time speakers, so I only have second-time speakers. I would like to, I do have a first-time speaker. Councillor Logan.
I'll move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder to that? Great, thank you. Discussion, oh, sorry, that was moved by, or seconded by Councillor Kobayashi. Councillor, I still have Councillor Day and then Baxter to speak in a moment, but Councillor Kobayashi, you were the seconder. Do you wish to speak at all? Okay, then let's go to Councillor Day and then Baxter.
Thanks. I forgot to mention, I did note in the report that the applicant does require access to the back of building 3. And my concern is around when you create the access for the owner of the building, how to secure that. And it is an area where I've heard a lot about concerns, both long time ago now when we had Mayor Saunders and his family had the dealership in that area. And they had a lot of difficulties with people breaking in and creating problems for businesses in the area, and the difficulty of pursuing them. So it's an area that I think we should look at carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot one question. In the report, there's a reference to overweight retaining walls, and I don't think there's an ideal weight for retaining walls. So is this meant to be over height retaining walls?
Yes, that was a typo of over height. That's what it was meant.
Yeah, was that a Freudian slip? That's a heavy wall. All right, I'm not seeing any other motions, or excuse me, any other comments. So I will call the question. Those in opposition to this motion? Councillor Day opposes. The motion passes. Moving on to bylaws. If you recall, we're going to do 7.2 first. So this is bylaw number 1923, 2022 to 26, financial plan bylaw for second and third reading. Moved by, sorry, you're giving me a strange look, Councillor Parkinson. Sorry? That's after. Yeah, we're doing 7.2 and then we're going back. Remember at the beginning? Yeah, so thank you. Moved by Councillor Logan. Do I have a seconder? Second by Councillor Kobayashi. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving back to 7.1, this is bylaw number 1909, off-street parking regulation, bylaw number 1909-2022. A, report from Ian Borhill, our Director of Community Planning, draft off-street parkings, and B, bylaw number 1909. Council, what I realize you probably, people don't have paper, council, so I'm not sure the page to refer you to, but if you had a paper version, I would refer you to page 138 to begin. It is page 2 of 12 of the report, which is the draft staff report of March 14th. There were 15 questions that were asked by council, and in this are the 15 answers to the 15 questions that were asked around the off-street. What I'd like to do is work through all 15 questions. I'm going to group them in groups of 4. If there isn't anybody wishing to discuss, for example, group 1 through 4, so 1 being raised crosswalks in commercial parking lots, 2 being sidewalks in commercial parking lots, 3 being electric bike charging, and 4 being whether to include specific areas such as Kelly Road in the western part of the Souk Road in the urban central map. If there's no issues with those, then I'll move to the next group. If there are comments on the first 4 questions, then I'll stop and look for a specific motion. Councillor Day.
Okay, you'll have to bear with me because I didn't have any paper printed for today. I'm switching between apps so I have it on my agenda app. And I would like to speak to sidewalks in commercial parking lots.
Okay, number 2, great, thank you. I'll come back to you. But you know what, I'm gonna do them in order and let's just see if people have, I think it might just be cleaner that way. Number 1, raised crosswalks in commercial parking lots. I am going to assume that option A is always make no change. So unless, do I need a motion for each one of these? Or if with make no change, can I just move to the second one if nobody wants to talk about it? Okay, I will seek a motion on each then. So Councillor Day, I will come back to you on number 2. So number 1, you can see the options. There's A, B, and C. May I just get a mover? Councillor Parkinson's at the list on top. So Councillor Parkinson.
I'll move option B.
B. Option B is alter the draft off-street parking regulation bylaw number 3.9.1 to the following to include a requirement for raised crosswalks in parking lots with 30 or more spaces. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Kobayashi. Discussion. Councillor Parkinson, did you wish to discuss?
No, not especially.
Okay. Then I will go to Councillor Baxter on this one.
Okay, I looked at this and looked at Hatley Center parking lot, and that is much more than 60 spaces there. And I sort of looked at where 30 spaces were in that parking lot, and I think a raised crosswalk is unnecessary if you had a parking lot that was only 30 spaces. So I'll propose an amendment, and we can either do that separately or Councillor Parkinson can accept it, but I'm going to propose 60 spaces instead of 30.
Okay. I will come back to you on that amendment just to allow everybody to have an opportunity to talk before I look for that. So is that it?
Yep.
Okay. So Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. My question is similar to that, actually. I was wondering where the 30 came from. Is it our expert that came up with that number? And it doesn't depend on how it's all laid out too. Like very similar to what you're just saying, Councillor Baxter, if it's, straight line, I can see that, but if it's sort of shaped so that you can't get speed on it, then I would say no, it depends on how it's designed. So, but I guess my fundamental question is, first of all, where does that 30 come from?
So let's go to staff. I see Mr. Borhill. Mr. Borhill, did you want to comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to acknowledge that we have our lead consultant on the project, Dan Casey, Transportation Planner with Urban Systems, here to assist council as well. As stated in the staff report, the 30 space trigger for this was suggested based on existing wording requiring sidewalks for parking facilities of 30 spaces or more. The thinking being that the need would be greater for medium to larger sized facilities as well as the capacity to incorporate the raised crossings into the plan would be greater for the larger type sites. Anything to add to that, Dan?
No, I think that's good explanation, Ian. And I think the 30 spaces for the walkways was a number that was worked through in the preliminary review. And so really it's sort of a number that we all kind of settled on, and this raised crosswalk component is just sort of piggybacked onto that.
So just further to my question then, so but wouldn't it depend on the design? Like if you've got a U-shape, you know, a business plaza, you know, does it still apply, or L-shape, or I can see sort of different configurations where it just seems like a low number. That's just, you know, this is pretty just purely anecdotal, of course, but wouldn't it depend on the design? Is that a factor in this?
Through the mayor, I think it could. I think that's where we need to be careful with how regulations are stated, in that we don't want them to be limiting. I think the way that both the requirement for the walkway and then the item that's come up as a potential requirement around the raised crosswalk would need to be worded in such a way that it wouldn't be limiting and be prohibitive in certain layouts. But I do think generally, and you know, Hatley Plaza is one example. There are others. Who knows what else is to come? That the requirement, if this requirement for a walkway, which has been proposed, gets included in the final requirements, then the requirement for the raised crosswalk that's being contemplated here would generally be compatible with anywhere that a walkway goes in.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you. So I'm just switching my view here. It's kind of hard to do this, but number one was raised crosswalks in commercial parking lots, and number two is also raised sidewalks in commercial parking lots. So I guess I'm confused between raised crosswalks and sidewalks. I think for consistency, if I spoke about the Hatley parking lot, because Councillor Baxter mentioned that is a good comparison. That particular location can be very difficult to access the businesses when you have to cross the main route of travel, where it's quite close to the entrance at Souk Road, for example. So there is a painted crosswalk in the parking lot there, and there are also speed bumps in the parking lot to help slow traffic. But the raised crosswalk, I think, would make it much safer for people trying to access the sidewalk that's fairly close to the entrance onto Souk Road, for example. And there is a sidewalk in the parking lot adjacent to the interior parking stalls that is raised, and that is really helpful. That's making anyone walking through the back portion of the parking lot much safer, because the traffic is naturally moving slower in that area because it's a little more constrained. So I think those are both recommendations that would assist with making parking lots safer for pedestrians. There's also the opportunity that I think we need to consider, which is that because circumstances do make a difference in each parking lot, which everyone has mentioned here tonight, that if we had a rule that we set the bar fairly high at the beginning, and that there could be an opportunity for an applicant to request a variance due to the site circumstances. Would that be a reasonable way to approach it?
Your worship, certainly a development variance permit application is one means of which a property owner could seek relief from this proposed regulation.
Is it the best way, though?
Through your worship, if and when council chooses to adopt the new off-street parking regulations bylaw, it would be the appropriate way to receive a variance. A development variance permit is a means set forth in provincial legislation to reduce requirements. There may be potential for a board of variance decision, but I suspect in all likelihood, most cases would go through a development variance permit process.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to go back to Councillor Baxter for his amendment.
Okay, so I propose an amendment to change the number 30 to 60.
Great, thank you. Do I have a seconder to that motion? Mayor Martin will second that motion. Discussion on the amendment. Seeing none. Oh, yes, sorry, Councillor Baxter, go ahead.
So I just wanted to point out that number 2 is about sidewalks in commercial parking lots. So there is a sidewalk right in front of all of the businesses in Hatley Plaza, for instance. This is about a raised crosswalk, and staff report has made mention of the fact that the raised crosswalk increases cost of building, and it also increases maintenance cost. At least for snow clearing, it does, and possibly for cleaning. So it isn't completely a small thing to ask of anybody. And if you can imagine a parking lot with only 30 cars in it, and how often one of those cars will get up and leave, or another one will come and join, it's going to be pretty easy to cross that parking lot if there's only 30, if it's a 30-car parking lot. Whereas Hatley Plaza itself, which is, you know, something like 70 or 80 cars, there's a lot more movement in that parking lot. So that's why the proposed amendment to 60. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Day, and then Councillor Logan.
Thank you. I can support the amendment, but I don't know that, you know, arbitrarily assigning the 60, it may change other factors. So I would hope that we are looking to ensure that all of our commercial parking spaces are safe and are helpful to the people who use them, as well as the people who work there.
Thank you, Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the amendment. However, I won't be supporting it for this reason. I think when you look at big tracts of land, you could have a series of 30 stall projects that butt up against each other. And in that case, it would support having some sort of a raised crosswalk to act as a safe pedestrian corridor and some traffic calming. Prime example is West Shore Town Center that was developed in kind of a piecemeal kind of fashion. And if you walk along Phipps Road through the development, you will see sidewalk, and then the sidewalk ends and becomes very uncomfortable for pedestrians because it was developed in a piecemeal kind of fashion. And so that's where I'm thinking, if we have a series of 30 stalls, which would negate any kind of improvement, we might be defeating ourselves and really doing pedestrians a bit of a disservice. When I take into account the experience at West Shore Town Center, which could happen in Allendale District as an example. So I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins.
Yeah, I'm going to say that after listening to my colleague, Councillor Baxter, he won me over, and I will support his amendment.
Okay, Councillor Day, did you want to respond again? Or is that an old hand? Oh, okay, hands gone. Okay, I don't see any other hands. So this is just on the amendment to move the number from 30 stalls to 60 stalls. Those in opposition to the motion, please raise your hand. Councillor Day and Councillor Logan oppose. That motion passes. Brings us back to the main motion. Any other further discussion on the main motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition to the main motion? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Moving on to 2. This is sidewalks in commercial parking lots. Councillor Day, I will allow you to go first. You brought it up first, so.
Okay,
You have a
great.
motion that you'd like to move?
Sorry, thank you. I'm just getting to my paperwork. There we go. I would move option B, that off-street parking include a requirement for a sidewalk in all parking lots associated with commercial land uses.
Great, thank you. Do I have a seconder to that motion? Seconded by Councillor Baxter. Discussion, Councillor Day, do you wish to discuss further?
Nope, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter, are you good? Good. I'm not seeing any other hands. So I'll call the question. Those in opposition, please raise your hands. Nobody opposes. Moving on to 3, electric bike charging. May I get a motion for electric bike, Councillor Parkinson, please?
I would move option C and make it say that there will be no requirement for electric bike charging in parking lots.
Okay, no requirements for electric bike charging. Thank you. Do I have a seconder to that motion? You have a seconder? Okay, seconded by Councillor Baxter. Not the seconder I was expecting, but, but I will go to Councillor Parkinson to discuss.
So, I support electric bikes. I suspect a lot of people will use them as we create more and more jobs within Colwood. We'll have more and more residents commuting to those jobs. But they're going to take their batteries inside to charge or somewhere else to charge, and creating a bunch of external plug-ins for battery charging or whatever. It's an expense. It probably gets abused as much as it gets used. And frankly, I think people with electric bikes can figure it out where and how to charge their batteries without having to have an external plug for them. So.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, so my feelings are similar. I note the reference to old studies. Old studies would have looked at old bikes, and modern bikes have a very much higher density of charge. For instance, my bike has a 5-pound battery that I can bike to Gordon Head and back quite easily. I can probably get to Sydney and back if I put enough leg effort in. And I don't know anybody who wants to take his electric bike further than that for short-term parking. If you're going that more than that distance, you're probably going to be in some kind of office where you're going to be able to plug in anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I see? Oh, Councillor Day.
Thank you. So I find this one very difficult. I do understand that this is, it's a big stick that we carry. So the external plugs, they are an expense for the buildings that will be built. There are a lot of e-bikes that certainly have greater range ability than they've ever had before. But there is also mobility scooters and that could use this benefit, and I find that that it's difficult to I can't tell you how many times we've talked about local shopping areas at the Disabilities Committee where people have run out of charge. They've been pushed to a location and they can't believe that there's not one plug-in to be found anywhere. So I just find that this is short-sighted. Every time we get people to feel comfortable with using a non-car resource within our community, that's going to be to the benefit of the whole community. So I would wish that we could find a better way to address this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just make a couple comments. To be honest, I was surprised. I was surprised by Councillor Parkinson and Councillor Baxter's comments. They caught me off guard because they bike far more than I bike, and so I look to them as more expertise than me. I didn't see this as a large burden on developers, just from the standpoint of if we were anywhere else in Canada other than lower BC. I mean, there's plugins at every stall for heaters in the winter times for people in Saskatchewan and everything else. So, I mean, it seems like we're the only jurisdiction that doesn't do this because we don't need to because of the weather isn't so cold. So I just never saw this as a huge burden on the development community and was prepared to support the staff recommendation. And I think I'm still leaning that towards that way, but I do appreciate the expertise of people who know more than me. Staff, perhaps with my rambling, and now you know what, I'm not even going to ask the question. Never mind. Councillor Baxter.
To clarify something, we're zeroing the requirement for plugins for short-term parking, but leaving the requirements for long-term parking. Is that correct?
I will look to staff to
Well,
clarify.
make sure that's what we're doing.
Your worship, the item that was raised in the January 10th meeting was in specific relation to short-term parking. So at this point, the options presented, strictly speaking, to those requirements.
Just short. So just short term. Did that answer your question? Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
So let's go with the compromise. Compromise. Let's go with minimum, the requirements, the CRD guidance, 10%. I don't have a problem with that. It just seems like a good compromise. Sort of a win-win-win for everybody. Yeah, for short-term parking, for short-term bikes, it's they use the guideline of 10%. That's in the staff report here.
Fourth paragraph.
Yeah, so I'm just recommending that as a compromise. I can vote either way here.
So yeah, so we do have a motion on the table right now, which was to just remove it. Correct, Councillor Parkinson? I'm just trying to phrase it the right way for you. So let's do that first. Let's have a vote on that, and then if it doesn't pass, then I'll come back to you and look for a second motion.
Or it is possible to make an amendment.
Oh yes, or you. Sure. Sorry, hold on 2 seconds. Sorry, did you want to do a friendly amendment? Okay. Can you turn your mic back on and I'll be done.
I would like to do a friendly amendment of 10% using the CRD guidance.
Okay. Do I have a seconder to that amendment? Seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Thank you. Discussion on the amendment. Doesn't look like we have anybody, so I'll call the question. Those in opposition to the amendment? Councillor Baxter opposes. So that motion passes. Takes us back to the main motion. Let's vote on the main motion now, unless there's any other discussion. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Let's go to 4. Whether to include specific areas such as Kelly Road in the western part of Souk Road in the urban center's map. Options you can see there. Do I have a mover? Excuse me, sorry, Councillor Parkinson.
Yeah, I think this was my hobby horse here, that I think perhaps we should be restricting a little bit where we're facilitating growth within the community. So what I would like to do is move B. Option B, update figure 1, urban center areas eligible for reduced parking requirements in section 3.11 of the draft off-street parking regulations bylaw to exclude areas adjacent to Kelly Road and the western extent of Souk Road as shaded in yellow in the above. And most of option C, which says, again, to exclude areas within the transit growth area along Souk Road, west. Oh, yeah, no, I don't want to, I don't think we should eliminate it along Souk Road where it's in green, but on Veterans Memorial Parkway, except where it butts up to Souk Road, should be eliminated. Does that make any sense to anybody?
No, you lost me.
Sorry.
So
anyway,
you move B, and then should we just start and then add Veterans Memorial Parkway to shaded in green? Could I?
Yeah, let's do that.
Can I?
That's
So
sort
if
of-
I minus
No.
out, I'm sorry, Councillor Day.
Sorry, that was the opposite of what he said, because that is the same as I have highlighted in my package.
Well, I'll go to Councillor Parkinson because it's his
So, yeah,
motion,
so what I think we should do is eliminate parking reductions on Kelly Road, the western extent of Souk Road. And then on Veterans, I would suggest that we could eliminate Veterans, but we've just approved a project at the corner of Veterans and Souk. So, you know, I guess, we could leave it, or we could say that section of Veterans except the stuff that fronted onto Souk Road.
Staff, are you comfortable with that motion? Is it clear?
Your worship, we could certainly come back with an amended draft bylaw that's provides a map that interprets the any direction from council provided tonight, just to ensure that we have a correct understanding.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Earl, with what has just been said by Mr. Borhill, does that mean if this motion that we're presently talking about passes, does that mean that this bylaw doesn't move forward this evening? We would not look to, if the maps need to be updated and things?
Thank you, Your Worship. Administration would have the map intended as we believe we heard tonight when you next see the bylaw for further reading.
Okay, great, thank you. So thank you. So the motion's on the table, it's been seconded by Councillor Kobayashi. Discussion, Councillor Day, then Baxter.
Okay, so my concern when I read the report is that the transit growth areas are including Veterans Memorial Parkway. When that was added to our OCP as an urban center, it was not really an urban center. It was a node and then later got upgraded. So I just want to be clear that we that we're not creating all of Colwood to be the city of Victoria with no parking anywhere, because that is a disincentive to many. So I'm trying to clearly articulate that Veterans Memorial Parkway is not, in my opinion, been supported by the community to be a growth area for the city, that it is a rural area with nodes on it, including Souk Road.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
Councillor Parkinson said this is his hobby horse, but he needs to make up his mind whether he's riding a bike or a horse. But aside from that, if you think about Veterans Memorial Parkway, where it's colored green there's a park all down the left side. And down the right side, there's no properties that can be developed except the one Councillor Parkinson referenced, which we've already rezoned. And the townhouse development that's probably in that greenhouse, green zone, but it's already built. And it's not that old. So I don't think that we need to worry about Veterans Memorial Parkway one way or the other. But I would be opposed to eliminating the Kelly Road and Souk Road area as well, because Kelly Road is, I'm sure, headed for massive development once we get sewers there. Same for Souk Road over time because of the amount of bigger lots nearer to the road. And that'll be a transit corridor that will develop heavily as well, I think. So generally, I'm going to be supporting option A.
Okay, Councillor Parkinson.
Yeah, I don't disagree with Michael's comments that Kelly Road, has a lot of potential for development, as does Souk Road, I guess west of VMP. What I am against is sort of a little bit here, a little bit there, and bopping all over the place. And I think it's more beneficial to sort of go. We have a lot of places zoned for development at present. Enough to fulfill the growth projections of the OCP easily. So, rather than dealing with one project on Kelly and all the sewer extensions and that, we can be patient and let it develop in its own time, in its own way, perhaps when the time is ripe. And as I said, I just think we're better off to focus development more in some of the more readily developable areas than bouncing it all over the place. And that's why I have concerns about calling, urban center on Kelly and on that section of Souk Road.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I will call the question. Those in opposition to the motion? Councillor Baxter, Mayor Martin, Councillor Logan. So that motion fails. Do I have another motion? Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move option A.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Baxter. Discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. Oh, Councillor Day.
Sorry, I will be having to oppose that because that includes densities in areas that haven't been considered for those densities in our OCP or elsewhere. So I just think that we're extending our transit growth area without a mandate to do so.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'll call the question. Those in opposition to the motion? Councillor Kobayashi. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Councillor Day, did you wish to speak again?
No, sorry. I'm trying to manage my hand.
No, it's fine. So Councillor Kobayashi, Councillor Day, Councillor Baxter. So that motion fails as well. I'm sorry. Oh, excuse me, Parkinson, Day, and Kobayashi. What did I say? Baxter? I'm sorry. I don't know how that happened. My brain's going mush. So okay, so we've got no changes. Mr. Earl, what do you suggest?
Earlier this evening, I suggested for expediency, you could seek motions to make no change because it would speed things up.
Yes, I remember that.
Absent a motion here, no change is included, and the bylaw will keep moving forward as it's written.
Right, yeah. So make no changes has failed though. So does this mean should I, I'm just talking now. Should I defer this whole thing until we have 7? Sorry, I'm just going to look at the staff and then I'll come to you, Councillor Baxter.
Council could work this evening to find a solution that was supportable by the majority.
Okay, or push it. Okay, got it. Councillor Baxter. Oh, sorry. Now you can.
If no motion is approved, then no change happens. So the fact that there's no a motion to have no change has failed still leaves it unchanged. Now that doesn't mean to say that the next time council meets, because we do have to consider this one more time, that with 7 of us around the table, you couldn't get a different result. That could happen, and you can amend it at 3rd reading. So I don't see the need to hold up progress because of the fact that we have one member missing and we can't seem to get a majority on.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate the advice. I'm struggling because I have heard other councillors thinking that this, that there should be some sort of motion that lands on this, and that the motion to make no change didn't pass. And so I guess I will look to the table. I guess the table, it's up to the table. If the table wishes to continue to proceed, we can move on to 5, or we can.
Mr. Mayor, may I
Sorry.
be recognized?
I'm sorry, Councillor Day.
I'm just asking if I could be recognized.
Yes, you may.
Okay, so at least for my part, I think we should try to create something that we can all live with, those who are here to vote here tonight. I'm looking at the staff report and at the map. And I'm just trying to suggest that we find a way to make it work. So I heard a lot of support for keeping Souk Road in the transit growth area and for keeping nodes that we already know are in the process of developing as transit growth areas, so including the Allendale lands in that. Would that produce support around the table? I would be happy to make the motion to include the lands on VMP in the Allendale district. And then further changes could still come forward when the bylaw came forward, but the staff would have the direction they need to create a map that we could comment on.
Okay, Council, you're clear on that motion? No. So Councillor Day, can you please, can you restate your motion for us so that?
So that it would be, I'm just pulling up the motions from it, that the update, the draft off street parking bylaws to exclude, oh no, sorry, wrong spot, next spot. Sorry, it's not coming up for me. Oh. Okay, I was trying to work from the map in the report to just clarify the transit growth corridor as being all of Souk Road and including that portion of VMP that would be described as the Allendale district. Is that clear?
I will look for a seconder, and that might help us figure out if there's clarity or not. Do I have a seconder to that motion? I do not. So I will go to Councillor Parkinson. Councillor Parkinson?
I'm not sure if this is going to work, but I would move option B.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder to just option B? Councillor Kobayashi has seconded that.
And I think that highlights most of what Councillor Day was speaking about, and is perhaps clear enough that there's no confusion anyway. Whether there's support or not, we'll see.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just reading through it all. Councillor Kobayashi, do you wish to as a seconder?
Yes, thank you very much, Your Worship. Just to further add on, like this is just because it's such a change to the OCP. I'm just going, wow, it's a fundamental change here, and that's why I'm going to support this right now. You know, we've even had the discussions here with the public to even have a chance to even, you know, see if this is an agreeable thing. So that's why I have all kinds of problems with this right now. And that's why I would support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Sorry, I was left up from before.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, I will call the question then, unless there's anybody else. Seeing none. Okay, those in opposition. we're still stuck. We're still at 3-3. So sorry, just sorry for Councillor Day. It was Councillor Baxter, Mayor Martin, Councillor Logan. Yeah, I guess we'll move on and then we'll have to circle back to it. So let's go to parking that exceeds 50% of minimum wording. Do I have a mover? Oh, excuse me, Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to move option A.
Option A, great. Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder to that? I will second it. Discussion? Excuse me. Sorry, you're the mover, so I can give it to you to discuss first and then Councillor Parkinson.
Yeah, very simple. The original wording was unclear. This wording is crystal clear. Yeah, means the same thing. It's not actually a change, it's a clarification.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson?
Thank you. My concern with the way it's currently written and proposed is that it refers parking variances, I think, of up to 10% of the stalls or up to 10 stalls maximum, maybe I forget exactly, to staff if other amenities are provided.
Yes, sorry.
Me bad. I certainly support the motion.
Councillor Day doesn't have her hand up. Yeah, it is getting late.
I-
Okay, let's call the
Sorry.
question on
I'm
this
very,
one. Oh,
Can
sorry,
I-
Councillor Day.
could I get clarification on the motion here, please? Because I'm
Sure.
confused.
So it's option A was moved.
I thought it was option B.
No, it was option A. Just confirming with Councillor Baxter, and he's shaking his head. Yes, it was option A that he moved
Okay, so you're. if-
of number 5. Yeah, let's just be clear.
Of
We're on
number
number 5,
five.
option A.
Okay, sorry. All right, I got you now.
All right. Okay, I'm going to call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Councillor Parkinson, would you like to talk about number 6?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, Councillor Day, go ahead, Councillor. Oh, were you opposing, Councillor Day?
I was opposed. Thank you.
Hey, please let the record show that Councillor Day opposed 5A. Councillor Parkinson on 6, which is parking variance delegated to
Thank
staff.
you. I would move option B, delete section 3 of the draft parking variance policy, continue the current practice of all parking variance requests being referred to council.
Great, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Kobayashi. Discussion? Councillor Parkinson, do you wish to discuss?
Sure.
I should have turned off your mic.
You got the power. No, only again, I think that it probably puts staff in a bad situation where there's a potential to reduce parking stalls with some minor things that cost a lot less than parking stalls. There may be arguments to reduce parking stalls. We're already, I believe, reducing them substantially. So let's make them come to council if they want to reduce parking stalls. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands. Councillor Baxter?
I was going to oppose this, but I think I'm going to support it because we can always come back and add this to the bylaw later. So that's kind of my message to staff. If we're getting too many variances that are too minor, then by all means bring forward an amendment like this in the future.
Great, thank you. Not seeing any other hands, so I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 7, process for council to change parking requirements if there are any parking issues. This is just commentary, but Councillor Parkinson?
I'd move option 8.
Great, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Logan. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Oh, Councillor Day.
Wow, that was going awfully fast. and I have lost
Just
my
staff commentary, so.
Right, right. So I think it's actually even though there's not a lot happening as it appears with the motion, I think it's important to recognize that we have some limitations. Our new minimum parking requirements can only apply to new developments, not to old developments. So you know, each time we look at a development, we need to be making sure that the parking is adequate, or we're going to end up being like many places are quickly becoming now, where you can't find parking and therefore the businesses may suffer. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 8, language for potential increase to parking in areas that council or staff consider appropriate. Councillor Baxter. Thank you. Option A has been moved. Discussion? Excuse me, Councillor Logan seconded it. Councillor Parkinson?
Just curious, Councillor Baxter, why you didn't move A and B?
The decision down here, but I'm willing to listen to arguments.
Mr. Mayor, just for clarity, those of us on Zoom, we're not party to all of that conversation, but you know, I know it's getting late and we're all getting a little punchy here, so I'm just trying to let you know.
Thank you. Well, were you not able to hear Councillor Baxter? Councillor Day?
Sorry, I could only hear Councillor Baxter.
You were not able, sorry, when Councillor Baxter was speaking, were you not able to hear him?
I was only able to hear Councillor Baxter. Someone was replying. I don't know who.
Oh, okay. I think it was Councillor Parkinson, so we'll blame him. Councillor Parkinson, yeah, we're throwing you under the bus there, fella. But you have the mic on now, so it's all you.
Well, I mean, I think it's going to happen. It's just a natural thing that B is direct staff to undertake review off-street parking requirements based on site-specific character. I mean, presumably that's what we would expect our staff to do if something came through to say, here's what the bylaw says, here's how this site fits into it. So I would move an amendment to include B in this.
I would second that amendment.
Thank you. Okay, so I have an amendment on the board. Is there any other discussion about the amendment?
Can I speak to it?
Yes, you may, Councillor Day, go ahead.
Thank you. So currently, every day I drive to work, I drive past a site. It doesn't matter what site, because I'm not trying to complain about anybody, but their recently developed sidewalk and bike lane are generally completely parked on top of by construction vehicles, making it difficult for anybody to walk on that side of the road. And that continues. So if we don't address the adequacy of parking in our community, then we are going to have to start paying for more and more enforcement to do something about the abuse of the parking. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands, so I'll call the question on the amendment to include B. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. So that'll take us back to the main motion, which is A and B. This is for number 8. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Moving on to 9. Address setbacks from columns and be limited to only surface parking lots. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to move option B, which essentially means that the wider parking stalls adjacent to columns applies in surface parking lots, but not for structured parking where it would increase the area to be constructed at great expense for probably minimal value. So.
Okay, thank you. So you're moving option B. Do I have a seconder? to that motion? Councillor Baxter, thank you. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Excuse me. 10, loading zones in front of buildings larger than the size of one parking spot. Councillor Baxter?
Option A.
Councillor Baxter has moved option A, which is make no changes. Do I have a seconder? Seconded. Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. Discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Councillor Day opposes. Moving on to 11, minimum of one access spot in every parking spot. In every parking. Well, that would be quite amazing. An accessible parking spot in every parking spot, in every parking lot. Councillor Baxter.
I move option B with an amendment that the starred note at the bottom, the number 11 be replaced with 7.
Okay, I don't need, this is your motion to start off with, so we'll start off with 7. I don't need an amendment to that. You're seconding it? Yes, Councillor Parkinson has seconded that. Is there discussion? Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I was just wondering where the 7 came from, Councillor Baxter. Just curiosity.
Yeah, I actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on 2 seconds, Councillor Baxter. My apologies. Go ahead now.
My thinking was that 7 meant that anything like a duplex or less would be exempted, but not anything bigger than that. And if my thinking on that is wrong and staff realizes it, I'd be very grateful if they stepped in and told me.
Just before I go to Councillor Day, or excuse me, Councillor Kobayashi, did you have anything else? Before I go to Councillor Day, can you please, staff, can you answer Councillor Baxter's concern?
Thank you, Worship. So likely the highest demand with respect to required number of parking spaces for a duplex or single family scenario would be a duplex with 2 secondary suites. In that case, a total of 6 spaces would be required. So that is correct. 7 space trigger would not require a duplex type development to provide accessible parking space.
Great, thank you, Councillor Day.
Thank you. So I just really think that even though not everybody needs an accessible space, everybody can use an accessible space. And there seems to be a lot of people who think you wouldn't need an accessible space for a certain type of business. But that isn't the reality. Disabled people go to work, disabled people have kids, disabled people do everything anybody else does, and including living in a suite of a duplex. So just try to bear that in mind. The question is, should your community be barrier free, or should you only have barriers in some places? Thanks.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I will call the question. Those in opposition to the motion? Nobody opposes. Moving on to number 12, provision of van accessible parking stalls. Councillor Baxter.
Move option B.
Thank you. So number B has been moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Parkinson has seconded this motion. Discussion at all? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 13, number of accessible scooter parking spots per building. Anyone? Oh, Councillor Day,
I'll move option B.
thank you. Option B has been moved. Do I have a seconder to option B? Councillor Baxter, thank you. Discussion, Councillor Day,
I'm good, thanks.
thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 14, connection to rental suite configuration and number of parking spots required. Councillor Baxter got in there first.
I move option D.
D, okay, thank you. That's strange. What is it? Okay. Yeah, are you seconding? Okay, it's been seconded. Discussion?
For
Sorry, so it's make no changes. It's D for number 14. Should be A, but they just went with a different. Councillor Day, go ahead.
Thank you. Just trying to speak to the issue. I'm sorry, I'm really unprepared for being online tonight, so I constantly flipping back and forth. It makes me slow. It's a major impediment to the creation of new secondary suites and small lot subdivisions. However, secondary suites and small lots have been at odds with each other for a long time, so I won't be supporting a make no change motion, which is on the table. I would rather see that a requirement be one per bedroom. Thanks.
Thank you. Just looking for hands. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I will call the question. Those in opposition? Councillor Kobayashi, Councillor Parkinson, Councillor Day. So that motion fails. Do I have another motion? Councillor, actually, I'll go to Councillor Kobayashi. You already got to make a motion.
Yes, I was going to, I was going to move option E.
E, thank you. So option E has been moved. And Councillor Day, are you seconding that motion?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Hands, discussion. No. Okay, Councillor Baxter.
I'm sorry that I wasn't able to make a motion that we move on, because we're putting ourselves back in that same position where if this motion fails, then everybody's going to get worried that the make no change has failed, and yet we're making no change. I reiterate that that is parliamentary procedure. If you cannot make a change, no change has happened. But I know we have troubles accepting that, so I'm sorry that we're doing this.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just Councillor Parkinson.
Well, let me try to see if I can persuade you, Councillor Baxter. The one per bedroom makes no difference on small lots with a one bedroom suite in them. And small lots are by their nature small houses, and perhaps more than a one bedroom suite is just, you might as well live in a condo. There are still some larger houses in this community that might have larger suites, and this would be a time to make sure they had sufficient parking, not on the street. So I had circled option E when I went through it, and I'm very happy to support this motion.
One per bed. Okay, sorry, thank you. I'm just struggling myself. Okay, I will call the question. So we're on E right now. The motion's been E. So those in opposition, please raise your hands. Oh, come on. I was all debating about, do I need to like not do it? No, you guys all don't do it. All right, so. All right, Councillor Day did not oppose, so the motion passes unanimously. Moving on to 15. My apologies for taking as long as I did. Single family dwelling requirements of 2 parking spaces on the property, not including garage, and additional parking spots for suites depending on size. Councillor Baxter.
I move whatever option B was supposed to be. It doesn't seem to be complete.
Your worship,
Yes.
I apologize for the error in the wording there. I do have wording that staff would have included if the error was not made to the report. And I can read that if you wish.
Sure.
So B, amend section 3.6 of the draft off-street parking regulations bylaw 1909 by adding the following. For residential one-family dwelling and duplex uses, residential dwellings with a secondary suite or accessory dwelling unit must provide all required parking spaces exclusive of a garage. I can put that on the screen if need be as well.
Okay. Does council need it on screen? Okay. You're moving that, Councillor Baxter? Councillor Baxter has moved it. Councillor Parkinson has seconded it. Discussion? Councillor Baxter?
I'm not totally convinced that this is the best thing to do, but I know for sure that we can amend it later. And I also know that the lack of something like this has caused severe problems in existing areas. And so I'm erring on the side of being a bit generous with the parking, in my opinion, but I would rather do that at this point and be able to refine it later than to not do it.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Mayor Martin opposes. So that brings us back to the bylaw. Let's go back to, so now what I need is, I need a recommendation to do first, second, and third meeting, consider first and second reading as amended of the 15 amendments. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Parkinson, seconded by Councillor Baxter. Is there discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councillor Logan. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Good night, everyone.